As a reminder, this event space is for sharing your opinions, so I hope that it can be a respectful and appropriate conversation. We look forward to that. If you're watching, if you have joined us for previous town halls, you've seen where the Chancellor has asked questions from you, the Pirate Nation. But today we're switching things around. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna have it so that the Chancellor is asking you questions. He's gonna be listening, he's gonna be taking good notes, and he wants to get your perspective on a number of topics. As your host, I'm gonna be assisted by a great team of technical staff who's gonna help navigate this virtual environment as we connect with Chancellor Rogers. For those of you who've joined us and are willing to raise your hand and speak and be part of the audience, I encourage you to raise your hand virtually through the format. There's a prompt where if you just raise your hand, I will then work through that, bring you up, encourage you to unmute yourself and join us in the conversation. This is a little bit of an experiment in the virtual world, so I hope that you'll have patience as we work through. If you raise your hand, I will call on you and we'll make sure that the conversation keeps going. So if there's a few technical glitches, let me just go ahead and apologize in advance, but I expect a great conversation. For those of you who are watching live broadcast on the ECU Alumni Association website, feel free to use the chat box on the right side of your screen. We will be monitoring that as those kind of comments come forward. I will try to weave those into the conversation as time allows and as it fits the conversation. So I hope we've got all that straight. Again, thanks for coming. We're really excited. I think we've got a broad group joining us today across the state of North Carolina, across the region. And actually, I think we even have a couple of people who are internationally calling in. So we're excited. So without further ado, I turn the virtual stage over to Chancellor Rogers, who will bring welcome and ask the first question. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Chris. Good afternoon, friends. I want to thank so many of you for plugging in during the lunch hour today. I know you all have busy lives and professional experiences that you're engaging in, and the fact that you've taken the time out of your day to share your advice and counsel with me as the new Chancellor of ECU means a great deal. And we're really grateful that we have you joining us for our final town hall event, which, as Chris said, we've really redesigned as a Pirate Perspective listening session. And this indeed is an experiment. So we thank you for joining us in this experimental digital world today, where we can learn as much as possible from some of our great alumni. As he said, I've done enough of the talking, and I'm ready to hear from all of you, because I think that will inform my perspective the most as I think about the future of ECU. And we really are grateful to have such a wide range of participants. I think I counted folks from Florida, Georgia, South Carolina. We even had a few from Ohio and New York. Of course, North Carolina is well represented in our dialogue today. And always love having an international participant from around the world. Many different views, a diverse set of views that I hope we can bring to the table. And before we get into the dialogue, though, I did want you to know what a joy it's been to serve as your Chancellor for the first almost 2 months now. I think I said in the town hall last week, we were on week 7. I guess this makes it week 8. And there really are some things in life that just feel right. And I can tell you with a tremendous amount of confidence that coming back home to ECU and coming back home to Greenville is one of those right moves for our families, right moves for me. And this work really is a calling. And we have a big job to do as we think about how we can best serve our university. And as I look around the Zoom room that we have here today, I'm really thrilled to be able to do it with all of you. This is a big week for Pirate Nation. If you're plugging into what we have going on, it's commencement week, and we're going to be celebrating some of the hardest working students during one of the most challenging seasons in recent memory. And I can't imagine completing my undergraduate or graduate degree during a global pandemic. I certainly can't imagine if I was in one of our health sciences fields and working through a clinical setting, what it would be like to navigate that learning experience during the midst of a global pandemic. So these learners really have something to celebrate on Friday, and we'll do it with 3 ceremonies at 9 a.m., 1 p.m., and 5 p.m. in Dowdy-Ficklen Stadium. So I hope you'll join me even digitally later this week in welcoming some of our newly minted graduates to the Pirate alumni family. So I want to begin this session today by recognizing that I'm sure that many of you, like me, have had a lot on your minds as we've been faced with a number of public challenges, whether challenges as an institution, challenges in our communities, in our nation, around the world over the last year and even longer. And frankly, I think it's important in times like these to just pause for a moment and have an opportunity to reflect together as a community about where we want to be in the future. This is really a moment of reawakening for our university, for our community, for our world. And I want to take the time to hear from you about where you believe our university should be in the coming years. And so I hope this session can be a moment where we can all just take a big, deep breath. We can acknowledge that things have been tough in our society and that ECU has a vital role to play in this moment of reawakening, especially as we emerge from the pandemic era. So I want to spend some time hearing your thoughts about the future of our university. The easiest speeches are those when somebody else gets to do all the talking. So we have a great group here, and I want to turn the reins over to you. And I hope you're ready to dig into the dialogue. And so why don't we just jump right in? This is one of our first sessions of what we're calling the Pirate Perspectives listening tour. It's the launch of it in my new role as Chancellor, and it's going to be a series of conversations across our campus and across the entire ECU community and the local and regional community here in Eastern North Carolina over the coming months, where I'll have a chance to hear from everyone. And I say this all the time, but I'll say it again to tee up this session. I always want to be very crystal clear that I'm extraordinarily cognizant of the fact that I don't come to this role with all the answers. And I think that's a big advantage because it gives me a chance to listen to all of you. And so let me start with a couple of these questions here, and I'll prove to you I'm ready because I have my purple notebook and I have my pen, and I'm going to be taking good notes as we dig into this. And hopefully you had a chance to see some of the questions when you registered for this event, but I'm going to hit the highlights of all of them, and then we'll kick off with the first one. And the first is a softball question. I hope you can knock it out of the park. And it's where does ECU have key advantages and momentum? Where are we moving in the right direction right now? What are the areas that we need to keep moving on and keep committing to as a part of this university? I want to spend about 10 minutes on that question. And then the second one, we want to dig a little bit deeper into what you all think are some of the biggest challenges ECU is currently facing, or help us look around the corner. What are some of the challenges that we will face in the future, in the coming months and years, and why we're going to face those, and perhaps what we might be able to do best to respond to them. Now, we'll take another couple of minutes to talk about what you think are some of the most promising unexploited opportunities for growth at ECU. What do you see as our greatest opportunities moving forward? And then we'll wrap up in the last 10 or 15 minutes with the questions that everybody loves to answer the most. We've done 3 or 4 of these so far. Number one, if you were me, what would you focus your attention on as Chancellor in the first couple of months on this job, maybe even the first year? Number two, suppose a headline is written about ECU in 5 years. What would you want that headline to say about the future of our university? And then the final one, maybe not thinking around the long term, but in the short term, what's one thing that we could do to make ECU a better place right now, today? So that's the lineup, and we have until 1 o'clock Eastern time, in case some of you are joining us from across the country or world, to dig into these questions. We have about 45 minutes, and I'm gonna tee us up with the easiest one, and I'm ready for your perspectives on where does ECU have key advantages and momentum right now? Where do we need to keep moving to succeed in those advantages? So I'm going to stop talking, and I want to turn it over to our guests, who are all of you, our alums, to react to that first question.
Well, I'll jump in. Hi, everybody. I'm Joan Gray, Wilmington, North Carolina. I see my buddy Cedric over there, who's right down the road. And thank you for the time. First of all, I have to say that my daughter, Dana, is graduating on Friday. So I will be joining you in Greenville and hoping that it does not rain. We're looking at the weather very closely, but I also know that can change at the last minute. So super excited that we've got a commencement ceremony, and appreciate your words of encouragement around the challenges that these kids have endured. But on the other hand, I will tell you that it looks like the job prospects are a lot better this year than they were a year ago. So that's a good thing. I mean, your question about the momentum, first of all, I also qualify it that I'm a huge Pirate. Our whole family now, as of Friday, will be Pirate alumni. So I am biased, but I think the momentum is, I think that kids at ECU get a very unique experience of community and family that, quite frankly, I don't see other students, North Carolina college students, necessarily always getting. I think that the challenge is helping prospective students to realize that and understand what that means, because it's hard to really sell that until you actually experience it. And it's interesting coming from like my daughter's perspective now. She's heard it all her life. But now that she's at the end of this 4 years, she's looking at it and she's looking at her friends that have been at other universities. And of course, everybody is proud of their university and, you know, and as well they should be. But I think that the connections that you make at ECU are different in many ways. So what I think, regardless of what program that you're in, and even though we're a very large university, there is a family feel in the overall university, but also in the departments. And there's a way to get connected. And I think that we do a really good job. And I think back to my experience with both of my kids going through orientation and the encouragement around getting connected and making those connections to the student's success. And I think ECU is very committed to that. And we say it, but we also do it. And that's been my experience as a parent. So I think the good thing is that we have those things. The challenge is getting that word out there and helping people to see what is unique about ECU versus other universities, because the challenge too is that there is a lot of competition out there, and there are I mean, it's like we're battling for the right students to be at ECU because they have a lot of options. And I mean, it's almost a marketing challenge, I think, many times, helping people to see the opportunities that await them at ECU versus potentially other universities.
It is a very challenging market, and I spent the last several years watching it from a high level at the American Council on Education, and it is broadly across the country, it is not trending in the right direction. The report came out from the National Student Clearinghouse last week, not specifically about ECU, but combining all the institutions in the country together. We've seen almost a 6% decrease in enrollment across this country compared to the spring of this year to the spring of last year. And so it is a worrisome trend. And I think being able to articulate our story, as you described, is at the heart of what we need to be able to do to capture the students in the market that we need to be at ECU. And having seen a lot of other campuses, I think you're right. This is one that really embraces that unique student experience and that family feel as a part of how we try to serve our students and serve our community. And I couldn't agree more. And I love to hear that the job prospects are in good shape for your family. We're gonna bring you in and have you be the keynote speaker to our admissions and enrollment team at some point. Really inspire them in a great way. Who else wants to weigh in on momentum, key advantages that the university has right now?
I'll speak up real quick. Thank you for doing this, Chancellor Rogers. Rich Stain up here in Richmond, Virginia, graduate in 2010. I think you being on board, having consistent leadership is a massive advantage and something that we've been pining for quite some time now. I also think the passion of our alumni base and having that chip on the shoulder, kind of mentality that I know. My grandmother went to ECTC back in the day. All my friends from ECU, we all have that chip on the shoulder approach. And I think that's a huge advantage. not only while on campus, but also once we graduate and, do get into the workforce and everything. But thank you again for doing this.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. There's nowhere else in this country, no other university in this country that I feel like I can literally be on the other side of the world wearing a pirate hat or a pirate sweatshirt and feel the passion and energy from someone saying my name and saying "Go Pirates" across the street in a different part of the world. So ECU brings that spirit. It brings that excitement to the chip on the shoulder mentality. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks. I'll mute me.
Well, Chancellor Rogers, it's Sabrina Bengal, and I'm so very happy to say those words, Chancellor Rogers. I'm very happy. And I just would like to ask you to continue to put great emphasis on economic development. I'm still wearing my hat as an elected official here in New Bern, and East Carolina has done more to impact this region, but I need it to continue to stay strong. I need for East Carolina to continue to reach out to our small towns and cities throughout Eastern North Carolina where we don't have the resources to potentially hire consultants or other people, where that knowledge that is based at East Carolina can help our cities in housing, in building starts, in so many different areas that we've become experts in. And so I'm going to continue to lean on my alma mater to make sure that we are impacting this region.
You hit right at the heart of our mission, Sabrina. And it's good to see you too. Sabrina chaired our board of visitors. She chaired our alumni. I don't know if there's any boards that you haven't chaired. If there is, we'll find one and we'll put you in.
Well, I hope I'm going to be back soon.
Absolutely. It's good to see you. And thank you for all you're doing over in New Bern to drive that regional transformation that we try to make so central to our mission. And we need people like you sitting in the seats that you're in as an advocate for both ECU and those regions in which you're situated. I was visiting with some folks from the Golden Leaf Foundation, and we were talking about how east of I-95 in North Carolina, of the 29, 30 counties, 21 of them are Tier 1 counties, the most distressed counties. There's only 40 Tier 1 counties in the state of North Carolina. And I saw Greg Chadwick on this call, and that's one of the reasons why we are launching a dental school, or we have launched a dental school with service learning clinics around the state to serve in those types of ways. It brings a tremendous amount of both economic impact, healthcare service delivery. We can make a difference in regional transformation in absolutely every way. So I 100% agree that that's a key advantage. It's an area of momentum, and we can't let our foot off the gas in that space.
Thank you so much.
Why don't we get a couple of more in now that the team is warming up and getting excited about talking about momentum. And I think I see Horace raising his hand there.
Just how follow some of the things Sabrina said. I think as we look at the momentum that East Carolina has, that dental school having the service center so far west has really opened some people's eyes, because I go back 50 plus years when I graduated, and the time when Dr. Jenkins was working so hard to get a medical school. I remember Dr. Batten in the School of Education saying that after he had trained the astronauts in celestial navigation at UNC, when he went to the legislature, he walked on water. After he moved 80 miles to East Carolina, he was the dumbest guy going when he went back with Dr. Jenkins to lobby in the legislature there. There is that bias against Eastern North Carolina, and yet that's a marvelous opportunity for us. Today, I work with entrepreneurship programs, elementary schools through community college, and it is just absolutely amazing what the East Carolina entrepreneurial effort is doing and what it can do, because in Eastern and Western North Carolina, if we don't create jobs, people cannot stay in an area that they love.
That's right. More of the same of that. Thank you, Horace.
If I may tag on that, Steve Eagle, I'm down here in Savannah, Georgia. I graduated 40 years ago, and so I don't know if I might be looking at it from a different lens, but in my heart, I've always felt like that East Carolina was a welcoming university, and I feel like that's an advantage that you've always had. I'm an example of someone who you gave a chance. That maybe didn't come out of high school with a stellar grades, but I think you saw potential. And my time at East Carolina was certainly life-changing for me, and I'm sure there's others there at the university like me that feel the same way. So in terms of the culture, I still think East Carolina is a welcoming university.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Good to have you joining us from Savannah. I'm going to come see you soon. I've got family down in Hilton Head, just 45 minutes or so away from you. So we'll plan a Georgia, South Carolina trip and make sure the Pirates are welcomed and visible down that way.
Come on down.
All right. Why don't we pivot to the second question to ensure that we can get as many in as possible? And this one is a little tougher. Want to open up the door on what are some of the big challenges that we're currently facing in your minds as our supporters, as our alums, and what do we need to pay attention to as we think about challenges that may be around the corner in the future? We want to make sure we're preparing ourselves to not be reactive to challenges, but to proactively identify them well ahead of the time and be able to address them early on. So talk with us a little bit about where you see challenges arising and perhaps how we might be able to address them.
Chancellor Rogers.
Please.
Hi, how you doing? I'm Cyrus Manavi. I'm a graduate of Brody School of Medicine, class of 2006. I'm actually practicing pathologist in Wilson, North Carolina. I think, in my field, which is laboratory medicine and pathology, this pandemic particularly brought to fore the importance of keeping the programs that are extremely important in healthcare, particularly the clinical laboratory science program that East Carolina has. We heard that there was a problem with the program, and there was thoughts about closing down the program, which was actually became a major source of concern, particularly for me, because I run laboratories across the east of 95, multiple hospitals and doctors' offices. And frankly, when we have a laboratory technician or technologist, retiring or moving, we have a hard time recruiting. And we always look at the ECU to see what students are coming out that we can absorb. And the problem, again, like I said, it's important to make sure that these programs, particularly in this the healthcare field, stay open and continue to thrive, which requires really a lot of support from industry and also the administration in East Carolina. I think as far as there's some of the other challenges, as one of the others attendees spoke, I think we have to think regionally and globally and out of state. We cannot just continuously try to look at East Carolina or North Carolina in general to recruit students. We have to look at all the students across the country. And also even globally, bring in students from international students that can come here, contribute, and maybe stay here. So I think it's time to kind of change the way that we look at recruitment of students. We have to look at every possibility. And I think the same thing actually goes for the Brody School of Medicine, where the class of East Carolina, essentially the people have to be really resident of North Carolina in order to kind of have this opportunity to apply to Brody, but frankly, I think we need to look for who's qualified, who's the most qualified, and most of the people come in and will stay in North Carolina, make North Carolina home. From our class, 25% of us stayed in North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina, and are practicing medicine in Eastern North Carolina, which is it's pretty huge. So I think, like I said, it requires another way of looking at things if we want to continue to expand in this day and age, which is all about we have to look at everything globally than just regionally. So thank you very much for listening.
I think that's right, and thank you for your service in the medical field, in the health sciences world. You represent the heroes of this day, and we're grateful to have so many of them coming out of Brody and our many other health sciences programs. I was on a podcast yesterday as the featured guest to talk about the stimulus dollars that have come in from the federal government and the way that ECU has leveraged those to respond to COVID-19. And it's really impressive the way that our university has stepped up in not just a regional or state way, but in a national and a global way to respond to those needs. And I think you hit a really good point about recruitment and about being strategic in that space. We've been hurt by the pandemic, especially on the international recruitment space. We've seen some declines, as many other universities have across the country, in the number of international students that we have. Now, the good news is that in this admission cycle, it's trending back up as the pandemic begins to lighten a little bit, but really important to keep that front and center in all that we do.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I see Jim Kirkland is going to weigh in with us. He's got his pirate hat on today.
I always wear your purple and gold. Matter of fact, I was at a steakhouse here in town last night, and a former football player was there, and I was with 3 other ECU graduates, and we had quite a conversation. Dr. Rogers, my question is, how is East Carolina going to gear themselves to recruit when the present administration in Washington is pushing for 2 years free education at a community college?
Yeah, I think you put your finger on a challenge. I know we have Kimry on our team here who's capturing these challenges, but I think what you're getting to are, how do we operate within the context of federal policy initiatives that will impact our enrollment strategy? And it's actually a big question across the country right now. What does this free college debate mean for campuses like ECU? And I don't have a lot of I don't feel strongly that it's going to gain legs, candidly. It's going to take a lot of maneuvering and negotiations across Congress and in the executive branch for that to happen. I'm not convinced that it's going to get to a place where it's going to be able to pass. But if it does, we'll have to think pretty carefully about ECU's strategic role in a world in which education is more affordable through funding from the federal government. So you put your hand on a good challenge, and we need to mark it down and be very thoughtful about how we're going to do that. Thank you, Jim.
The Chancellor, I've got a comment from the chat, but I think Julia has raised her hand. Julia?
Let's go to Julia, then we'll hear your comment from the chat.
Hi, thank you for having these town halls. I really appreciate it. I'm a graduate of from the Allied Health Program, the DARS program in clinical counseling, and very proud of my faculty. And I was on one of their calls recently, and they were talking about a lot of the initiatives they're taking to improve a lot of what you're asking about. So to build on some of those challenges that in allied health, I think it's important to look at recruiting what is now called a lived experience researchers, like in disability studies or in mental health. And that basically means that those are individuals who have extensive experience with certain systems that have been damaging and are now going into research and into academia to try to fix those things through research. Nev Jones at University of South Florida is one of the leaders. She's extremely prolific. Also, I think that when we speak of family, I know for me, DARS, my department, I felt very close to my faculty. But there were some challenges in our multicultural class. Luckily, the teacher was aware enough to bring in speakers because he was a white male. He, a few generations, an immigrant, but ultimately a white male. And he brought in a speaker, and a Black female scholar, and we had to have a discussion about the N-word because it was being used freely among many of the white students. So those they're aware of that now because I was in that class. Additionally, I think I'm losing my train of thought. When we speak about it being a family experience and that everyone feels a part of that family, I think that's, I'm trying to say this very honestly and kindly. I think that experience is very different depending on the socioeconomic background of the student, what they have access to, if they have a disability, if they are of a marginalized BIPOC population. I think that experience is very different. And I think in addressing coursework in history or in anti-racism, not just at the classroom level, but I think at some of the more exclusive student groups, fraternities, sororities that are built by generational wealth, that has to be examined. Because I have seen things in the community from those types, those students that are with the very high end, very exclusive generational money, fraternities and sororities, behaving like an ECU student shouldn't, to put it mildly. So I think that those areas need to be explored.
Well, thank you so much, Julie. I appreciate that perspective and those thoughts about the future of ECU. I think there's always opportunities to improve and strengthen our work in the area of creating that sense of belongingness on campus for all students. And that approach, it really does ground ourselves in the world of creating an inclusive campus space where you come to ECU and you feel like you belong, you feel welcomed, you feel like you're loved and cared for. And we want everybody who walks through our doors to have that experience. And it takes intentional work to be able to do it, to get it right. So thank you for calling that out. I think it's important that we have those conversations front and center with each other.
Thank you. And one more thing, I'm in another PhD program right now, building on my master's in clinical counseling. And when I was at ECU, we partnered with Temple University through a grant program when I was, because I worked at main campus in the STEM programs there. So more of that too could be a possibility. I would love to see more partnerships in that way. And I have access and information about grant money, speaking to what our representative from New Bern said, that can bring money to this area. But I've had a lot of pushback, things that Charlotte's doing, Greensboro, things that are happening in Raleigh. They're getting all the money, and we could get some if there was less pushback on more modern paradigms in mental health. So just throwing that out there.
And mental health is a huge one. It's the number one topic right now that we're tackling in higher education, especially in these global pandemic times, and helping our students thrive and our faculty and staff who have experienced a very different professional environment over the last year. And so thanks for putting that on the table, and good points around the resources. I've never known Chris Diva to turn down that conversation, so that might be a good connection at some point after this. Diva, do you want to give us the chat? And then I see another hand raised here in the group. I think you're on mute, my friend.
Boy, after all this time, you would think you would finally remember how to turn that on. Two great comments in our chat room. And again, to our audience, I encourage that you feed the chats. We're going to be looking for those and getting these on into the program. One chat verbatim is the challenge of bias. We've already talked about that in student recruitment. And it was already mentioned here, but this person says, in 23 years of service teaching high school, 8 years of high school, there is just a stereotype of ECU that it's 100% wrong, that bias. And so I think we've talked about some of the image of ECU or Eastern North Carolina, Eastern 95. I think this comment speaks to that. Another comment in the chat room, and I'll speak to some of our town halls as well, but this person says, I feel we need to do more to encourage people of color to join ECU. what is your vision, Chancellor, for making ECU a leader in this area? And I know this is more about comments from the audience than comments from you. But as I think about all three of our town halls and the questions that we received a number of questions and comments about diversity and inclusion and making sure that our institution represented the region and that our faculty and staff represented our student body. So I share those comments to be recorded, not only just in this one chat, but from the town halls that we've seen.
Yeah, thank you for bringing in all of those perspectives, especially from the chat, because we have a number of people who are plugging in face to face today. But the chat tool is just as important because we're capturing all of these ideas. And if you can't get it in on the chat or you're commenting virtually here in person today, go to the website. We'll make sure to fill out the survey, make sure to share your perspectives there. We're going to capture every idea and every perspective that we can. I want to get Cedric in, who has his digital hand raised, and also want to remind everyone on the call, I'm going to be turning to you in about 5 minutes to ask you what you think the headline should read when it's written about ECU 5 years from now. What do you want that big storyline to be, that narrative to be about ECU in 5 years? And what do you think I should focus my attention on as the new chancellor? I'm 8 weeks in. Hopefully many more weeks to go. And where should I focus my attention? So let's stay on this topic of challenges for a few more minutes. But in about 5, I want to turn to those 2 questions as we wrap up over the last 15. So Cedric, why don't we start with you?
Welcome, Chancellor Rogers. Our mutual friend Pollen told me to tell you hello when I got a chance to speak with you. I shared with her that I was excited about your presence. I'm one of those people that don't believe that you can buy a purple tie the night before you are announced and bleed purple. So it's refreshing to see someone who has Greenville and ECU roots sitting in that chair. So thank you very much. We're proud to have you here, and we're looking for exciting things. Some of the things that I wanted to address, I probably was one of those chats, comments that was sent in about diversity. One of the challenges that we face is that very much at the forefront now, the words equity, diversity, inclusion. In every venue you're in, those things are at the forefront. You spoke of a changing dynamic. You spoke of intentionality. All of these things are things that are very important. As we look out there to recruit students now, they're looking at universities much differently. They're looking for places where they can come and get what they need. You know, many times you hear the word equality, and that means everybody gets to come to the show. Equity means everybody gets to sit in a seat that fits them. And so in many cases, when you look at where you're going to land, you're looking at a place to provide these things. And if East Carolina provides these things, I don't think the community colleges will be a huge challenge. Given the choice of coming to East Carolina, going to a community college, you know, unless it was absolutely, totally financial, I would never make that choice. I graduated from East Carolina in 1976. I've seen the university go through a lot of changes during those period of time. We're looking for what opportunities that we have in the future to grow this university. I think we've missed a great opportunity in that there are so many people before we were talking about equity and inclusion that we've lost along the way. And Chris and I have had these conversations before that we need to reach out to people that have graduated from this university and reclaim them. Their experience might not have been the greatest experience when they was there. I'm unique. In the 70s, my experience was great. I have never left. I've been in the Pirate Club for 30, 35 years. I've sent my money off for my season tickets last week. So, I mean, I'm totally engaged. But our greatest opportunity, we're uniquely positioned in a region of the state where we are the beacon. The light that we shine out there will impact what the attitudes and what people think. It impacts economic opportunity, growth. So if you ask me what I would suggest to you going forward, I would say take an assessment at all levels of the university. put a grade out there. How do we stack up as far as diversity and inclusion? Not just from the student level, from the faculty level, from the service level, at every level of the university. And once you see where we stack up, we will take advantage of those opportunities to make us the university. I was never a fan of the slogan, the next great national university, because that meant to me, we're saying we're not great already. We are great already. We were designed to be the greatest regional university. And we're sitting in the eastern part of North Carolina. And I say, not just a place where you go to school. Let's be the impetus for change, diversity, inclusion, economic growth, the whole ball of wax. And that's what I would love to see.
Well, I promised Chris Dibba that I wouldn't get on my soapbox on this one, but every time somebody raises it, I'm just going to jump on it for 30 seconds and say that I really do believe in what you just described, which is this doing what we do best, which is student success, public service, and regional transformation, and doing it in our market, doing it in our backyard so well, dominating that market, dominating that region in terms of the impact that we can make. We do it so well that everybody else around this state and everybody else around this country looks at us and says, how did they do that? How did they transform Eastern North Carolina? And how do we model ourselves after ECU? And as you develop a reputation like that for being able to transform a region, for being able to change the attainment level of people across this state, for being a diverse and inclusive and equity-minded campus, people start to pay attention. And I know it because I sat in the seats at the American Council on Education watching other campuses around the country who are often seen as the most innovative campuses in the United States do it. And they started in their own backyard, and they did it so well that they became a national model for how it's done, and others are trying to work to replicate them. So I resonate with your perspective there, and I also agree, Cedric, that this work around equity and diversity and inclusion it can't be done in a silo. It has to include the broadest set of constituencies across Pirate Nation to really be able to engage in a collaborative and a comprehensive effort to address these issues. So we're going to be taking a very holistic approach to that work because we want to not just change one particular silo, but we want to bring meaningful change across our campus in a positive way that impacts the most amount of people. I think we can get to a place where we really own our history and where we can develop a strategy and a plan in that space to move forward together in a productive and healthy way. So there are opportunities to improve there. We are going to have to work intentionally to eliminate disparities and to close achievement gaps in learning among our students and how we think about career advancement and recruitment and retention of all of our students. So you raised some really critical issues that we're thinking about, and it just puts the finger on the pulse yet again that it's an important challenge that we have to address. So thank you. Deb, I want to check with you to see if there's anything else in the chat before we pivot to the last couple of questions here.
I do want you to pivot just to comment related, maybe the last comment on this section, but related to the DE&I, the diversity, inclusion, and equity conversation. Just a comment that you need to be very intentional in the messaging, that you need to be very public. We can have internal conversations all day long, but if Pirate Nation doesn't know those are happening, doesn't help with student recruitment, doesn't get the message out across the region, the state, et cetera. So just a comment from the chat that I appreciate.
Great. It's that concept of affirming and strengthening the public's trust that we're working towards these issues in a very strategic way. So that narrative building part of what we do is going to be very important in terms of sending the right messages to all of our different stakeholders. Why don't we take we have 13 minutes. And I know folks are probably on their lunch hour, and you likely have 1 o'clock meetings to get to. Well, I'm going to combine. This is going to be the catch-all question. We're going to put everything into this one last big bucket for the last 10 or 12 minutes or so. This is the one that usually generates the most fun. So I want you to put your newspaper editor hats on, and if you could write that headline 5 years from now about what it says about ECU, to give me the headline and why. If there's something that you think that I should focus an intentional amount of time on as Chancellor, as I lead our team moving forward, I want to hear that. And what's one thing we could do to make ECU better right now, outside of these big, broad deep processes that take years to change. Are there some things that can happen tomorrow that we can do to make ECU a better place? So 10 minutes, fire away. Dibba, who's first?
Got a hand raised. Horace Robertson.
Muted here. I like what Cedric said about looking closely at what we do, because I don't know what that headline would be, but I hope it would be about excellence and innovation in some way. I think there are things that we all appreciate. I recently heard a TED talk from a teacher, and I'm an educator, so I really appreciate it. He said that great teachers communicate effectively. They appreciate differences. They relay feedback to students. They evaluate themselves. If you work your way through that, you see that what that says is they care. CARE is the acronym that creates. And I think that's one of the things that East Carolina does. I grew up near Roanoke Rapids in northeastern North Carolina. The thing that I appreciated and grew from were those people from New Jersey, Delaware, Ohio, all around that came to East Carolina. That was part of my growth and development, and that helped me appreciate diversity.
Absolutely. Thank you, Horace. Chris Dibba and our leadership team are going to be tired of me using the word innovation at the end of this Pirate Perspective listening tour. That top item on the list, one of the top items on the list, we have to be driven by innovation in all that we do. And I just sit in the presence of some of these university leaders that I've had strong relationships with over the years, and they're driven by new digital technologies. They're driven by automated technologies and ways that we can meet students and learners where they are, meet the community in the region where it is, in order to advance our mission. And it requires an innovative strategy to do it. And I want us to be a leader in that nationally. And I think there's a void to fill in the state of North Carolina, and I think we're the best position to do it. See, David, I believe.
So I can already see it in the headlines. ECU leads North Carolina in solving coastal problems. So I'm a graduate, I'm an alum from 2009. I'm also returned back and a faculty at the Outer Banks campus, right? And we are, literally making waves out here in the Outer Banks, right? We have an amazing institute out here. I went here for coastal geology, right? I explicitly came to ECU to address coastal issues, and I've come back now to do the same and teach the next sort of generation of students to understand coastal problems, the complexity of those coastal problems. And I think ECU is well poised for that, to have our Outer Banks campus to be really the only, research, or one of the only research institutes in the northern part of the Outer Banks, right? And addressing many of the coastal problems. And, you see one of the maps behind me, right? I mean, there are many issues in terms of, the dynamics between, humans and the natural environments, but thinking about fisheries and the blue economy going forward, right? ECU is poised to lead that direction for North Carolina, right? We have all of these sort of interesting things going on. And that's where I see a lot of sort of that growth, and the growth is already happening. But to really, put that forward, and I do see in 5 years those headlines about ECU, leading, and I think Horace mentioned, right, innovation and excellence in, solving coastal problems.
So David, hope you're in town next Friday, because I'm coming.
I will be.
It's coming, right? I'm coming to see you. I'm bringing Peter Hans, the president of the University of North Carolina system. We're going to spend a whole day with you on the Outer Banks. And I know that Reed, Dean Corbett, and the team have a great lineup for us. I've been looking forward to this since January, right after I was announced. And there's not many other programs at ECU that have modeled themselves in an interdisciplinary way, the way that the work of the Integrated Coastal Studies program have. I mean, it's hard to find programs where students can go to an on-site location like the Outer Banks. They can study business, coastal impact, tourism, the arts. I could keep going, 3 or 4 others. The way that you bring in so many other different disciplines across this institution, it's a well-rounded approach to solving what I would call a grand challenge for our country, which is the coastal work that you're doing there. So I can't wait to see it in person. I'll report back to everyone how wonderful I know it's going to be. Reed even tells me he might get us out on a vessel for a quick tour if possible. So really looking forward to being with you next week. And thanks for your headline. Let's make it happen.
Chancellor, I've got 2 comments from the chat room, but I will go ahead and editorialize that says if you need a ride out to the coast, I'm happy to take you out there. Any excuse to get out to the Manio Warranties campus is well worth the trip. So 2 comments. I don't know if they fall in the category of something we could do better or if they're a headline, but I'll just read them. Our wonderful chair of the Board of Visitors, Wanda, has written in and said that we plan to have that board and that leader work closely with you to improve messaging and being an advocate for our campus. So I'll put that in the category of a long headline, but that's somewhere where I know they want to do better at, and I know they will. The other one, other chat is related to a challenge, something I guess we could do better, is that there has been a recent lack of consistent leadership at the university, and this person believes that has tarnished the image and reputation, not just by the general public, but among the alumni. And so I will go ahead and use this excuse to share that in a previous one, and I promise to the audience I'm not kissing up to the boss, but it is related to this challenge, is that maybe the headline of 5 years is that ECU Chancellor Rogers renews contract for another 5 years. That would be nice to have some consistent leadership to the point of this online chat. So thank you for both of those comments in the chat room. We continue to monitor those.
I'll take it, Diva. I'll take it. That it would give me the greatest honor in the world to know that I could continue to make a difference at ECU, and that my children could continue to grow up in a wonderful place like Greenville and on a college campus. So I'm grateful to hear that, and I resonate with the perspective on the importance of consistent leadership. You look at some of these institutions around the country that are in the top 10 or 15 in innovation. There are in some of the more advanced forward-thinking institutions, they're able to be in that space because of the continuity of leadership. It takes time. It takes years to build those types of networks. And we need a little time. We need a little time to focus and get under the hood to make that happen. So we're committed here, and we're excited about being able to do that. We have about 3 minutes left. Any other headlines or focus areas or things that we can do to make ECU a better place before we wrap up?
Chancellor Rogers, I was gonna just, I think I would like to see the headline saying that ECU is a leader in healthcare industry, biotechnology, information technology. I think if this pandemic really exposed a lot of weaknesses within our system, particularly within the healthcare system, and also information technology, and really showed that the battles are not being fought by multi-billion-dollar aircraft carriers, are fought essentially with a little plastic tip, Q-tip with a brush on the end in the hospital wards. And I think ECU is in a great position to kind of expand on the healthcare, be it nursing, physicians, clinical laboratory scientists, biotechnology, information technology, artificial intelligence. And I think this is the future that we have to invest in. And I think ECU is very poised to do that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The workforce development is a major focus area for ECU. And I was just looking at my notebook here because I had a couple of data points after having met with the North Carolina Biotechnology Center recently. And it's just stunning to see the job growth in the biopharma industry and the health sciences and medical industry. We had 4,300 new jobs created, $3 billion investment, $102,000 average salary, with just a couple of companies that have come in and invested in Eastern North Carolina. And the best part about it is that ECU is the feeder of students. We're the degree feeder that brings people jobs and brings jobs to this industry. So what a great way to wrap up a really terrific dialogue with this group today. And Chris, you know, the pandemic has presented a lot of challenges to us over the last year, but we can't forget some of the gifts that it's given. And one of the gifts has been learning how to engage together in a digital setting. I don't know that we would have been able to do listening tours like this as efficiently and as effectively if I had to get on the road every 2 days and be out in 25 different towns. We wouldn't be able to touch as many different people. We wouldn't be able to have as engaging of dialogues across many states and countries like we've had today. And we're still going to get out. We're still going to be present, but we're trying to leverage the situation that we have to the best of our ability. And this has been an incredibly rich conversation. And I walk away feeling energized and better prepared about how to think about the future of ECU because of it.
Well, thank you, Chancellor. I want to thank all of our attendees. I apologize that we weren't able to get to everybody. The hour goes quick, but I really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I think we took some great notes. There's the ECU website. Please visit the Chancellor's page. I think you'll learn more about the Pirate Perspectives. I think there's an online feedback mechanism that I think the Chancellor spoke to earlier. So please visit ecu.edu and then visit the Chancellor's page. Continue to communicate. We want to continue to hear from you. And again, thank you for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Go Pirates.